Let's actually, I think this, because we don't have too much time left in the main show, but we are going to touch a bit on Marx and Hegel. But I do think that this actually is a good way to transition to your second piece in Quillette.
Yeah, so actually
you published 2 pieces in Quillette.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I'm a huge critic of many things Quillette.
Yes,
But
as
as we all are, if Quillette, and I think this is a smart brand move if this is what they're trying to do. One of the knocks about the IDW, and I don't want to get into a whole IDW thing right now because as I write this book, I'm getting pretty fucking exhausted that I'm going to have to keep talking about them. But there is a market, I think, for people that actually lived up to that rhetoric. I think that there is some genuine, I really want to engage in controversial whatever thinking. Some good, some bad, blah, blah, blah. And if Quillette is going to start publishing legitimate pieces on Marxism by you and others, I think it's okay. That's an interest that they're gonna create. That's an open market right there.
Yeah, I would agree. I just want to put this on record because I am elsewhere on the record in Politico as if you say with contributors labeled everything from clowns to crypto fascists. If you click through the crypto fascists, you'll know this es mio, and I agree, but I totally agree with what Michael's saying. I think if the way that they've been going at Dave Rubin, just labeling him as accurately
stuff,
yeah.
Well, it's smart branding. I think that it's a combination. I think there's 3 things that I've noticed with Quillette, right? Because they got their start, and my opinion would also be crypto fascist, and then they sort of moved to occasionally doing I don't know, maybe this is a valid critique of a problem on the left, but I have plenty of problems with the left, but I wouldn't talk about them in Quillette.
Yeah.
I would only talk about them in a left-wing outlet, right? But that's still within the realm completely of essentially right-wing complaint politics, or can't talk about anything anymore politics.
Right.
But when they start, but then they did those 2 moves within a week where they had 2 of your pieces, and then they just had some guy basically just come forward and be like, Dave Rubin is maybe not exactly on the up and up, claiming not to be a far right, and of course Dave was he's totally unfair, he's totally mean, and it had a big meltdown. But I think that the smarter people in that category, and this is my speculation for purely cynical reasons, they recognize that they need to do some brand decontamination with Dave because it's just too transparent. Yeah. It's too goofy, So, but what was the second piece? It was first was why the IDW can't read Marx, which I recommend everybody read, and then the second was everybody values freedom.
Yeah, so they're actually published in the other order, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, my bad.
And the one that we talked about a little bit before was called Marx Needs Better Critics,
Right.
and is about Jordan Peterson's basically confession of ignorance about Marx in his debate with Slavoj Žižek,
Right.
That we talked about last week. And then the one, Why Everyone Values Freedom, which is co-written with Matt McManus, who is, like both of us, a author for Zero Books. He has a book coming out on postmodern conservatism, basically about conservatives being much more like the postmodernists they like to bash than they would like to admit.
Yes.
And in it, in this article, Why Everyone Values Freedom, we talk about how the right, which is often far more than we should allow it to, sort of monopolize freedom talk, basically has an understanding of freedom in terms of non-interference, with a particular emphasis on non-interference in markets. But there is this long and rich alternate way of thinking about freedom, going back to the ancient Roman Republic, which is freedom as non-domination. And this is certainly the tradition that Marx was in. Marx uses a lot of neo-Roman vocabulary, talks about wage slaves, a temporary dictatorship, the proletariat. These were all Roman concepts. And the non-domination tradition says what matters isn't necessarily how much you're being, interfered with as you attempt to do something. That might, of course, matter, but the underlying thing is how vulnerable you are to dominate, to like involuntary domination by others. And so, of course, Marx's...
I don't really like to talk about people. I like to talk about ideas.
I don't know if it's just that every time I see Dave Rubin now, I hear your Dave Rubin in my head. I'm sure.
Well, he's impersonating me.
I'm sure that's part of it,
Yeah.
but it's just something about the way he stares at the camera and blinks. He's just like the emptiest vessel that has ever been put in front of a camera. It's
Bolsonaro.
I think some people have been listening to this, though, and this is interesting. We played a couple weeks ago on the show a great Bernie ad on why Medicare-For-All is about, also among many other things, obviously, including just basic ethics, but also about freedom. Bhaskar Sunkara, who is a regular on this show, founder of the Jackman, one of the most important people in establishing any type of socialist thought in this country. His new book is excellent. I'm actually in the middle of, you know what, Matt? I'm literally in the middle of listening to it on Audible.
Wait,
The Socialist
that's
Manifesto.
on Audible already?
Bhaskar Sunkara, the Socialist Manifesto. It's on
Wow.
Audible. So go buy it or download it. Bhaskar is amazing.
I actually bought an old-fashioned Dead Tree version. I've been reading that.
It's a great book.
Well, the good thing to know about you when you say Dead Tree is that I feel like the paper industry is actually what do they call it, sustainable at this point. So you
Yeah.
don't feel bad about that. But I am gonna get the Audible version and probably read it. I'm not gonna say by the next episode, but by the next
You will be
episode.
listening to it by the next episode.
Excited for that.
Bhaskar is on the come up, and just as obviously our friend and crew, Bree Joy Gray, who everybody should subscribe, by the way, to listen to Burn Podcast. She's doing a great job with that, or hear the Burn Podcast. She's doing a great job with that. Bhaskar cut this ad for Bernie's campaign, and I think it actually echoes your article.
We know how important it is to defeat Trump in 2020, but I'm afraid that after Trump, a right populism might exist in the U.S. for a long time to come. Sanders gives us the opportunity to not just win one election, but to create the vast progressive majority that can win election after election. Because this isn't a 4-year project, this is an 8-year project. This is a project to remake America and remake American politics for the next 10, 15, 20 years. For decades, working people in the United States have been told over and over again that it's their fault. You lost your job, it's your fault. Maybe you should reformat your CV. Maybe you should take a coding class. You're drifting deeper and deeper in medical debt. It's your fault. Maybe you should have seen the doctor more. Maybe you should start doing yoga, exercising a bit more. All these messages have been telling people that the problems of society were individual failings. That's why I was so inspired by the Sanders campaign, because in 2016, and again now, millions of people are realizing that it's not their fault. In fact, they should be expecting and demanding more, and that collectively, we could fight for things like Medicare-For-All. We could fight for things like a safe and sustainable environmental policy that will keep the planet going for our future generations. What we need is a return to shared prosperity and justice for all people. That's why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders.
Bhaskar fucking crushing it for Bernie, but I think also echoing your points.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Bhaskar has been a big influence over the last few years in how I think about these issues, because this is a kind of framing that I've seen him use very often in Jacobin and elsewhere, which, of course, you can make the argument in the sort of more radical way that Marx makes it, or you can make it in a more small-scale social democratic way, but the core of the argument is the same, which is that if you're interested in freedom as freedom from domination, which I think is the kind of freedom, is the kind of personal autonomy that most human beings really care about, right? That like whether you can trace your property back to a just act of original acquisition isn't something that most human beings have any reason to be particularly interested in. Unless
you are an inherited, like you're a baron.
Yes, exactly.
You don't want to pay for kids' dental insurance. That might concern you.
Exactly. But for
Yes.
most non-barons,
Yes.
the question is, am I controlling in a meaningful, in-practice way how I live my life? Or is somebody else in a position to call those shots for me? Whether that's, do I feel like I can join a union, or am I worried that I'm going to get fired? Am I having to do everything my boss says, or do I feel free to say no? And One, of course, this is the problem with capitalism. This is Marx's point that most people realistically have no choice except for to submit to domination by a boss because, you can try starting your own business, but, it's hard to get together the starter capital. Most small businesses fail, in the first year. So realistically, most people have to do that. And so for 8 out of every 16 hours you're awake, you're taking orders from your boss. And even within capitalism, there are degrees of freedom. That this is that if you express a political opinion that your boss doesn't like, how worried are you about getting fired? If you get a tattoo, how worried are you that your boss will fire you for doing that? And one of the things that really chains us to our jobs in the United States, for most people who can get this for their jobs, is health insurance. That's right. Everybody is terrified all the time that if they lose their job, if they have to switch jobs, then they'll lose their health insurance. And so that's why, I know an ad that you played in a previous episode that, the Bernie campaign did is called Medicare-For-All is about freedom. Right. And that's how Matt and I start the article. Say, hey, the Bernie Sanders campaign put out this ad, Medicare-For-All is about freedom, which I think whoever put that ad out has been listening to Bhaskar for the last few years, because this is an ad this is an argument he makes all the time. And that, how does that work, right? What's the way of thinking about freedom here? And we go through the history. We talk about Marx. We talk about how Medicare for all, there's other social democratic reforms make people more free in practice. And I noticed even in the Quillette comment section, which, as I've had a couple of chances to experience at this time, is not the most friendly environment, for left-wing arguments. There is a lot of...
They're crypto-fascists.
There is a lot
Just kidding. Sorry for the ad hom.
there is a lot of, oh my God, why did they publish this? That's not...
I can't believe.
What is this guy's IQ?
Yeah.
He teaches logic, but his IQ clearly cannot be more than a 96.
Yeah, there's a lot of skull measuring. But even there... even if you have some backwards views about, gender naming and, SJWs and stuff, everybody's terrified about this healthcare thing. Everybody lives in fear of losing their healthcare. Even there was some positive responses to that argument.
Will quote, Jamila Michener, please listen to the Illicit History of Medicaid, and we're going to have her on the main show. But unless you're Jeff Bezos, this healthcare system is a threat to you. So... Yeah. It's a mass danger, and to obviously if you're middle class, if you're poor, if you're working class, of course. But, she has ethnographic studies in her book of people who might even be clearing $1 million a year, who had a kid born with the wrong decision, with the wrong, diagnosis. Their life is turned upside down.
Yeah.
This system... Private insurance is a structural threat to anybody that isn't a oligarch.
Absolutely.
Right? It is not you are. This is absolutely 1%, 99% issue. And in fact, it might even be a 0.2% issue.
I listened to that Illicit History. I liked it a lot. And one of the most interesting points that she made at one point in there, which goes to the point about freedom, is that, there's a point where in your discussion, you said, well, hold on. Even for the oligarch's perspective, right? This is a major business expense.
Right.
Why don't they just want to offload it onto government the way that big business offloads all kinds of expenses, for their onto government, right? That's half of what Rutgers does. It's free R&D for corporations.
Right.
And she mentioned some reasons, right? But part of it is exactly this, that people kind of know that the workforce is going to be more compliant.
Absolutely.
Right? If people are relying on their bosses for their health care.
100%. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.